I'm Matt Smith. Today on Upfront, the squabble over stimulus money, the governor and top Republicans disagree over the spending of billions in federal funds.
His plan is nothing more than a press release at this point. There's no detail.
Next, Speaker Robin Vos on why he says Republicans have the better plan. Then,
not only is Ron Johnson disconnected from Wisconsin, he's disconnected from reality.
State Treasurer Sarah Godlewski on why she says she's the Democrat who can unseat Republican Senator Ron Johnson. And healthcare leaders trying to boost COVID-19 vaccination rates in underserved communities.
Taking on the issues important to Wisconsin. This is Upfront with your host, Adrian Pedersen.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Matt Smith in This Week for Adrian. We begin with the latest disagreement between the Democratic governor and the Republican-controlled legislature. That's over how to spend up to $3.2 billion coming to Wisconsin through the American Rescue Plan for COVID relief. The governor and the legislature have some of the same priorities for spending the money. They just differ on how to do it. By law, the money is at Governor Tony Evers' disposal, but the legislature wants a say. Last week, both the Assembly and the Senate passed their own plans for what to do with that money. We're talking about all of this now with Republican Assembly Speaker Robin Vos. Speaker, good to see you. A lot to get to. Let's start with the federal stimulus. The governor will veto this package of bills. So what is your next move?
Yeah, it's unfortunate if he decides to do that because we have a really good plan. We've gone through a thorough vetting process. We had public hearings. We have a balanced package that focuses on aid to homeowners, aid to folks who own a small business or in the tourist industry, which has been the hardest hit. It also makes sure that we invest in things like broadband. So there's really no good reason why he would veto it other than playing politics. And I think that when the framers put together the Constitution, they never intended for one person to be able to make all the choices in state government. It requires compromise and working together, which is exactly what our plan is. So I know he said he is leaning toward veto it, but I guess I'm an optimist. I think that there's no good reason he should, and hopefully he won't.
Are you considering legal action?
We have to, but that would be a last choice, not a first resort. I mean, let's just look at it this way that, there's no local government in the state that would say the mayor just gets to decide how to spend all the money or the school board administrator or whatever it is. So it should be a bedrock of our constitutional republic that we have branches of government that each play a role, that no one should get to be dictator over the other. And that's what I hope we ultimately have out of this. So we saw the Supreme Court decided in our favor in multiple cases over the course of the past year, where we see that Governor Evers overreached on different topics. This could be another one of those. But again, it'd just be so much easier if Governor Evers would work with us to have a good plan put together, because I'm sure most people know his plan is nothing more than a press release at this point. There's no detail. Ours is actually legislation that's been voted on with the details that could help the state immediately, not a plan that might come someday somehow.
There's another of other COVID and vaccine-related bills working its way through the legislature right now. One centered around what's become known as vaccine passports that we've talked about a lot lately. Do you support this notion of banning private businesses from being able to require proof of vaccination if they want?
Well, I certainly don't support mandatory vaccinations. We led an effort, unfortunately it was vetoed by Governor Evers again, to say that we want vaccines to be widespread. I intend to take one myself. So I certainly am not anti-vaccine in any way whatsoever, but I certainly strongly believe that people have a right to make those choices themselves and not have it dictated by someone else. So do I think that you should have to have a vaccine to work at a factory or a fast food restaurant? I don't. Do I think that you should have to have a vaccine passport to be able to patronize a business? I don't. There's no science, there's no data that says that it will do anything more than hurt our economic recovery. So yes, I support that idea. I think it shouldn't be necessary because we should respect people's private wishes. But if it becomes that way, of course, we're going to have to go back.
There's been a lot of attention around legislation surrounding the election, not only here in Wisconsin, but in other states across the country. Here in Wisconsin, a dozen plus bills introduced dealing with everything from regulating drop boxes to more absentee ballot paperwork to limiting who can consider themselves indefinitely confined. Any legislation out there at this point that you don't support?
Not that I've seen introduced at this point. I mean, just the very idea of indefinitely confined, when we passed that as part of our voter ID, we wanted to make sure that everybody had a right to vote and that we had no unnecessary roadblocks in the way. So when we put a proposal together, indefinitely confined meant somebody who's in a nursing home, or it meant somebody who didn't have access to a way to get to vote. Well, here we are where we see people out and about on Facebook saying they're indefinitely confined. Well, that is clearly not accurate. It's a lie. people are breaking the law, in my opinion. So we're trying to make sure that we have something that is significantly more prescriptive, so people know exactly what it is to be indefinitely confined, and they don't break the law or try to circumvent the voter ID requirement.
Say critics out there, including a large number of corporations in recent days, have been speaking out against legislation, not only in places like Georgia, but Wisconsin and other states. They say this is simply voter suppression.
Well, they're wrong. You know, corporate America does many good things, but they are not engaged in the idea of how laws are made. I mean, they're engaged in selling a product or trying to appeal to a group of consumers, which I think is the virtue signaling that some of these corporations are doing. The idea of having a photo ID requirement is something that is broadly supported by the public. Photo ID requirement is required by many of these corporations to access their production facilities or to be able to deal with one of their vendors. So it's not something different than the most important thing our society has, which is the ability to legally cast a ballot. So, you know, I respect their position, but we are lucky that we have good corporate citizens in Wisconsin. We haven't seen that same kind of blowback because we have had a very reasonable approach to our elections to make sure that they are free, fair, and that no one doubts the outcome once the election is already concluded.
Another bill out there that's received some attention here in Wisconsin would ban transgender athletes from participating in girls' sports from kindergarten through college. Do you support this bill?
Oh, of course I do. I mean, the very idea that you are going to have people who are physically a different sex competing in sports really hurts the idea of having female athletics be premier across our country. We have got fantastic folks, and we had a press conference where we brought in some female Olympians who really talked about the idea that if you allowed men to compete in women's sports, no matter what clothes they wear in the dressing room or wherever they are, they certainly would have an advantage over the female athletes, and that's not right. So we're going to have a hearing on it. We're going to move that legislation forward. I think it's something, again, that's broadly supported by the public, that we want to ensure that folks have a right to compete, but they don't have an unfair advantage just because of a choice they're making.
Jill Underly was elected the next state superintendent. Are you concerned with the number of races that Democrats, statewide races that Democrats have won recently?
Oh, no. I mean, they have had a string of wins. They had 2016 where they lost. They had 2018, part of a blowback against President Trump, and of course 2020, where it was razor thin. So the fact that they are able to raise tens of millions of dollars from special interest donors outside the state to flood, lies and misconceptions about what's happening in Wisconsin, I guess that's their advantage right now. That's how Jill Underly won. She was outspending the conservative candidate 5, 6, 7 to 1 because of special interest money. Well, at the end of the day, we know that Jill Underly and her allies are beholden to the teachers union. They are not going to worry about what parents think or the voters. They're going to worry about the taxpayers who are funding their campaign through the teachers union. That's the ones that they're worrying about. So, I think it's kind of a sad commentary, but then again, I believe in the First Amendment, people have a right to do it, but they don't get to take credit because of the policies that they're enacting. All that they get to do is take credit for the success at raising huge amounts of resources from special interests to spread lies about Republicans.
And to that, the morning after she won, you tweeted, "Count me as someone who isn't going to support putting another nickel into this unaccountable state bureaucracy." Just unpack that for me for a second. Are you against additional funding to DPI because she won?
No, it's because of the agenda that it seems like DPI is fostering. It's not about trying to find the best results for schools. I mean, the very fact that Superintendent Underly said that she didn't even know when students should be back for school, she hoped for the fall, that is something that parents want now. They want their kids back in school. We have seen a lot of kids, especially those of color, lose almost an entire year of schooling. And if we care about the achievement gap in the state, putting more money into DPI, which seems like it's the same old with no real successes to point to, I would rather put that money in school districts and in kids all around the state, not into a Madison bureaucracy really beholden to the teachers union.
We've exceeded our time. Assembly Speaker Robin Vos, thank you for your time. We appreciate it like always.
Thanks, Matt.
You can see my entire interview with Speaker Vos on our website, where I'm asking him about the Evers administration's efforts to renegotiate the contract with Foxconn. You'll find that on the Upfront section of WISN.com. Coming up, a new entrant into Wisconsin's 2022 race for U.S. Senate. I'll talk to State Treasurer Sarah Godlewski about her candidacy and how she thinks she can defeat Senator Ron Johnson.